Good afternoon. Yuri Momoi, Deputy Editor of the Political News Department of Nikkei. This is the last session of the two-day program. Thank you very much for staying until the end. In the last session, we are going to look at the fast growing and also could be the engine for Japan, that is the foreigners and the foreign market, and how do you deal with it. And there are three people who are making the ambitious growth in this interesting sector. So I'd like to invite Mr. Ho, Mr. Hansing, and Mr. Karaike to the podium. Please take your seats. Thank you very much. Now I would like to introduce the speakers. From the right-hand side, we have Mr. Lawrence Ho, Mr. Timothy Hansing, CEO of Red Planet Hotels, which is the budget hotels. Mr. Timothy Hansing, and in the middle, could you wait, Timothy? I think you know him already. They're very popular in Kyushu. The cruise train Nanatsuboshi was created by Kyushu Railway Company. The chairman, Koji Karaike, is with us. Lastly, in Macau, Manila, the integrated resort business is being promoted by the Melco Resorts and Entertainment. We have Mr. Lawrence Ho, chairman and CEO. Thank you very much. So they have unique businesses. So first of all, I'd like to ask each one of them to talk about their business. And starting with Mr. Hansing, please.
Thank you very much for attending this last session today. I think it's lovely to see so many people here. I work and founded a company called Red Planet Hotels. We are a budget hotel company, and I have a small presentation here starting off with a video, just giving you an idea of the spirit and nature of the company and the brand and its values.
Could be larger than life, bigger than the world, living out the hopes and dreams of every boy and every girl. You could fly higher than the sky, shine brighter than the stars. You could have all you ever wanted, shoot the moon and reach for Mars. You know you could.
So Red Planet Hotels has 31 existing hotels and 8 hotels under construction in Southeast Asia and Japan. In Japan, we have about 1,000 rooms, with about 350 rooms currently under construction. We also have hotels in Thailand, in Philippines, and in Indonesia. We have a set of brand standards that we're rolling out across Southeast Asia. And in Japan, our standards are slightly different to the existing budget hotels. The rooms are larger, and the facilities in the hotels are designed for both Japanese and international visitors. For example, we do not have a bath in the bathroom. We have a shower only. Red Planet has invested a significant sum of its capital into technology, and we are transforming travel through technology. We have a very sophisticated pricing system, algorithms, which does 7 million calculations and recommendations every hour, and pushes out pricing recommendations to 42 different online platforms globally. We have a consumer-facing app. We are one of 2 companies, budget hotel companies in Japan that has an app. It's a booking app, but it also transforms itself into an in-stay mode, which gives effectively concierge services, abilities to book taxis, to call taxis, ability to have discounts in local restaurants where all our hotels are, and it is unique in this particular market. That piece of technology is unique. A little bit of time on this. So Japan represents a great growth opportunity for Red Planet hotels. And on the screen here, you'll see the bar chart, which might be a little bit small, but that represents the tourist arrivals in Japan since 2006. And just to give you an idea, since 2013, so in the last 6 years, you've gone from 8 million tourist arrivals to 31 million last year. That is without precedent in the history of tourism. It is the biggest growth that has ever been seen globally in such a short space of time. The next interesting thing about this is if you look at 2018, you will see that 19 of the 31 million tourists that came to Japan are repeat visitors. Repeat visitors are very important for a sustainable tourism destination because that is what makes it work, what makes it be a long-term achievement. The government wants to grow to 60 million tourist arrivals in 2030. Just to give you an idea, so that's double from now, just to give you an idea, that's not even as many tourists as they have in France every year. So it is not that much of an ambitious target and looks highly achievable. Thank you very much.
ありがとうございます。
Well, thank you very much for that. So I will ask the details later. So next, I'd like to call upon Mr. Karaike. Thank you very much. I am Karaike from Kyushu Railway Company. Please take a look at the screen. On the left-hand side, we have a map of JR Kyushu. This is the line of the railways. On the right-hand side, you see the history of our company. So 32 years ago, in 1987, until then, we had the one line or one company that is a national railway company, or Kokutetsu, was privatized, and that was divided into 7 JRs, that is Hokkaido, East Japan, Tokai, Nishi-Nippon, or West Japan, and Kyushu, Shikoku. And we are in the left-hand side, that is the west of Japan, that is represented in red. That is JR Kyushu, or Kyushu Railway Company. So 32 years ago, JR Kyushu, in terms of the revenue, the percentage of railway business was about 90%. So we only knew railway business. But after 32 years, now the revenue of the railway business is 34% of the total. And non-railway business, for example, the real estate development or distribution and the restaurants and hotels or condominiums, we are in the various businesses. And that is the business is actually 2/3 of the total. So it has grown to 2/3. The railway business has not shrunk. The railway business in terms of the sales has grown 1.54, but non-railway businesses grew even further or faster. So JR Kyushu's characteristic is that we are very strong in non-railway businesses. Also, if you look at the railway business, we have very fashionable trains. That is the image of the JR Kyushu. There is a trademark of that. So, for example, 7 stars in Kyushu, and also the resort trains, or design and story trains. That's how we call it, D&S trains. Those are the characteristic of our railway business. Now, it shows the overview of the various business. In the railway business, 2,300 kilometers, we have those lines. And as for the station buildings, Those are located, those are the commercial buildings inside the hotel, Hakata, Kagoshima, Oita, Nagasaki, Kokura. We have the station buildings. The total tenant sales is above 200 billion yen. As for hotels in Kyushu, all over Kyushu and Tokyo and Okinawa, we have built hotels. So right now we have 18 hotels. 3,645 guest rooms. As for the condominiums, we sell approximately 500 units per year, and there we are selling them.
Kyushu
In major cities, we are the only company which sells such many condominium units. JR Kyushu is such a company. And also, we have apartment leasing, more than 40 completed buildings. And also in the retail and the restaurant business, we have 700 stores, out of which 200 convenience stores and 200 drug stores. And we do have agriculture business as well. So we have diversified businesses. This is one of the examples. Our trains are very fashionable. The design is so cool. This is our selling point.
I wanna go back to the place where we lived and start over.
七つ星は
This is the Seven Stars. In 2013, in October, we inaugurated this train. The other day, it commemorated the 60th anniversary. Right now, the train is running as well. If you'd like to ride this, well, the application was 30 times as much, but right now it's 6 to 7 times as much. But still, well, there are some complaints from potential passengers that they cannot really get the tickets. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Such a diversified management of a business. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Ho, please. Today from Mr. Ho, there is big news.
I think first of all, thank you for Nikkei for inviting us to this conference. I've participated in other global forums in the past, and I must say this has been managed and organized in a world-class fashion. So thank you very much. I'm Lawrence Ho. The company that I founded about 15 years ago is called Melco Resorts and Entertainment. We are an award-winning global integrated resort developer and operator. We have hotels and resorts in Macau, Australia, the Philippines, Cyprus, London, and of course, ultimately, my lifelong dream is to build the world's greatest IR in Japan. And that in our 15 years of history, I've always talked to our colleagues about the fact that everything we build and the reason we do it so well and the reason that we aim always to exceed our past projects is so that we have a good showcase, a good portfolio, ultimately when it comes time for the bidding of the IR in Japan, and which is now upon us. And just to give you some perspective, we out of the locations that I talked about, we run over 5,000 hotel rooms in those places, and every single one of our hotels in each of the cities that we operate in are Forbes 5-star hotels, and we're very proud of the fact that we have more Michelin star restaurants than anyone globally in our industry. But really, the journey for me has started when I was a child. Tokyo in Japan was actually the very first city I ever visited as a child when I was 5 years old. And this hotel is amazing because My father used to stay at this hotel, and so my very first hotel I've ever stayed at, considering how many hotels I've built now, was actually here at Imperial. So this brings back a lot of memories. And I think since then, I have fallen in love with Japan, and I think that's why I've come back to Japan so many times over the years, really from the cities, the futuristics of the city, and the blend of history, heritage. So for instance, we're in Hibiya, and we're right next to the Royal Palace, and then at the same time, you have these modern, amazing beauty. So you have a very nice mix of both modern and history. And since 37 years ago, a lot has changed in Japan for the better in terms of the accessibility for international visitors. The language barrier is gone. Most people you can get around, whether it's GPS, technology. And I think since then I've visited from all the way from Okinawa to Hokkaido, and I've visited many, many times. And so really, building an IR is really just a gateway to attract people to come into Japan. I think Tim talked about how many people will be coming to Japan. And I totally agree, 60 million is a very easy figure to accomplish, considering how unique and how special Japan is. And I think that's why, on top of just trying to build IRs, we as a company, we listen to the national government. And one of the goals for building IRs is to have regional revitalization. And I think that's why also today, just fresh off the press, we announced a Melco Creative Exchange. And the purpose of that is that we want to introduce more visitors to go to the countryside, the rural areas, to really experience an authentic Japanese experience. And in my years of traveling in Japan, I think that's what Japan is, such a unique country with such rich history and culture. People really want that, rather than just going to another US city or European city. They want really a true Japanese experience. And so the Melco Creative Exchange will be able to do that. And we announced 2 projects, one in the Kanagawa prefecture of Hakone, where we're building a resort onsen hotel. And then another one in the Nagano prefecture, where we're building a ski resort. And we're very proud, again, to be working with, ultimately, Melco is a new 21st century company, so we work with partners. We're about inclusiveness. So we're very proud to be, and then we announced today as well, Shigeru Ban, a Pritzker-winning architect and a Japan icon, on the Hakone project. And also we brought on tennis sensation Naomi Osaka as our ambassador and also director of sport in all of our resorts in Japan. So really, we look at IR and also as these resorts really as a, we want to work with people who have a passion for Japan. Ultimately, I want people who share my love for Japan to be working on this so that we can really export the best of Japan to the rest of the world. So thank you very much. Thank you.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. So IR business and also Hakone and Nagano, the resort business, that's great news. Thank you very much. This is a very, very big brand, I understand. 27 billion yen, is that the scale?
The investment, the Melco Creative Investment Fund is 27 billion yen. And hopefully we can get other partners to Naomi Osaka, she has a stake in it on top of being the director of sport. She also has a stake in the fund. So we hope to bring on, again, we're a 21st century inclusive company. We want to bring on as many, as long as you have a passion and a love for Japan, we would love to bring on more people to get involved in that.
大きなビジネスです。
That's a very big business. I really hope that your business plan is going to be presented here. But before that, I have one question. Mr. Ho has visited Japan more than 300 times. Is that true?
It's 400.
400.
So from the first time I came, as I mentioned in the opening, was when I was 5 years old. And since then, my family, my wife, and my daughter, we've come to all parts of it, and we've experienced. And even when I was young, I used to spend parts of my summer in Karuizawa. And back then, the Shinkansen wasn't built. So we had to change trains 3 times, and it was a 3-hour journey. And just to show how much Japan has developed as a country over the past 30 years, now the Shinkansen has reduced that 3-hour journey down to 60 minutes.
他にも好きな場所
Do you have any other favorite places in Japan?
Elements of Japan, Hakone is another favorite place of mine because I love the whole wellness onsen experience. And my wife and I, for our first wedding anniversary close to 20 years ago, we spent it at Gorkadan. So that's one of my all-time favorites as well. And so very important, I think Japan deserves a curious visitor and people who come here more than just for shopping. And so I think that is very, very important. And that's why the Melco Creative Exchange is about trying to bring people to areas besides for Tokyo, Osaka, or some of the major cities, to really introduce people to different parts of Japan. Because whether it's Kyoto, going to the shrines, or going to ski in Nagano or Hokkaido, there's many different parts of Japan that people can experience. And so with the Melco Creative Exchange and the partners that we have, we hope to really introduce more of Japan to the world.
そうするとミスターホ
So if that is the case, Mr. Ho, the inbound market in Japan, you're a producer and you're a player. You're playing 2 different roles, I think. So as a player, you like Japan. So Mr. Ho, doing business in Japan, integrated resort or just resorts, there are major hotel chains, which including the onsen. There's Kusatsu, Beppu. All of them are coming into this market. So as a Melco resort, travelers coming to Japan, how do you approach? What kind of services do you want to offer to those travelers, tourists?
Japan is competing with, I think Tim mentioned earlier on as well, there's a goal of 60 million visitors in 2030. I think that goal can easily be accomplished by the government. And Japan benefits from having some of the best infrastructure, and that's always a critical element to bring in a lot of people. But equally important is really the quality of the people, because rather than having lots of visitors coming to Japan, and they're not really appreciating and respecting the history and the culture, I think the key is really to attract the right customer. And that has always been something that Melco has focused on globally in all of our resorts. So we don't have a cookie cutter approach. So when you go to our resorts in Macau or Manila or Australia, they don't look the same, because ultimately we want to blend in with the environment. We want the visitor, when they come to that city, to feel the city. And in Japan's case, that's even more pronounced, because ultimately the history and heritage and the uniqueness is even more. And so I think for the Melco Creative Exchange and for the rural countryside resorts that we're developing for Hakone and Nagano, is really how do we work with the local communities. Again, we want to be a part of the community. We always want to be partners everywhere we go. And so we want to make sure that we are promoting the area together rather than competing. It's about collaboration. And I think that is at the core of what Melco does. We have partners in every single country. Every single project we've ever done has always been in partnerships. And in the 15 years that we've been in existence, we've had these partnerships that have lasted that long.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Hansing or Tim. Earlier, you showed us the explosive growth in Japan that was very impactful. So, Mr. Hansing, this is unprecedented growth. You mentioned explosive growth. So why in Japan do you think that that kind of explosive growth was realized? How do you analyze that?
So it was one of the key planks of the government's desire to kickstart the economy was to open up the economy to tourism. And tourism can be a very powerful tool in a government's arsenal because it has great knock-on effects with employment and wealth generation locally in many areas. The ability for Japan to attract such large numbers was driven mainly by the visa-free, visa waiver program that they introduced, also opening up slots at airports and allowing low-cost carriers to come in, therefore allowing a lot of people who'd never been to Japan. I mean, the tourism numbers in Japan prior to this were very small, really very small. And so not many people have been to Japan. So this Japan is just this big mystery to people, right? And so there's as Lawrence was saying earlier, there's so much to do here. And I talked about the repeat amount, 60% of repeat visitors. So people come to Tokyo, Osaka, and Kyoto, and then they go home and they realize during their visit there's so much more to see, right? So they're very keen to come back. And so it's a very effective tourism program that's been launched. And it's not just that, it's also events such as the Rugby World Cup, it's the Tokyo Olympics. These serve as great advertisements for Japan and introduces a new influx of first-time visitors that can then be built upon after that to achieve the 60 million goal that's been set out. So it's a coordinated plan that's being very well executed. In line with that, you also have to build additional infrastructure, so larger airports, which is being done. The train infrastructure in Japan is absolutely amazing, and is unique in the world. It's so good, so it allows people to get around. So the infrastructure of Japan was already very good, but now growing it even further will allow additional growth.
日本の特徴
I see. So you talked about the characteristic of Japan. So Mr. Hansing, in Asia, you have hotels all over Asia. So when you have hotels, if you compare the Japanese market and Asian market, and are there any differences of the strategies that you use?
Sure. Japan, because of its higher level of international visitation, is a little bit similar for our Thailand hotels because that also benefits from a large amount of visitation. The Philippines and Indonesia is more domestic markets. In Japan, for us as a company, it's a lot easier. As a company, we have two income streams. Number one is the income stream from the hotels and the profit we make from that. The other income stream is from development because unlike many other hotel companies, we buy the pieces of land ourselves, we own the hotels, we own the land, and we build it ourselves, and then we operate as well. In Japan, it's different because it's very easy to build hotels. The contractors are so good. So when they say it's going to be on the 11th of August at 10 o'clock in the morning, your hotel will be ready, they're there, and it's done, and it's perfect. That's not the case outside of Japan in Asia. It's a lot more difficult. And we've built all of the hotels outside of Japan ourselves as well. So here in Japan, it's easier to do. And therefore, once we've built the hotel, we then enter into a sale and leaseback arrangement. And that allows us to take a profit on the development. And then we also, of course, keep profit from existing hotel operations on a 20-year lease as well. So it's different because it's so stable. And it allows us to do more fun things financially than the rest of our markets.
面白いですね。そういう
That's interesting. So I didn't know those the differences. Now, recently in Japan, we are seeing a lot of inbounds. So there are a lot of hotels being built. So, for example, in the urban area of Tokyo, in Shibuya, Shinjuku, Ginza, Akasaka, in the very concentrated area, there are a lot of buildings with the restaurants, and all of a sudden that building is gone, and they become small, medium-sized business hotels. So it is true that the 60 million inbound tourists, if that is realized, we still have a shortage probably. But we have to consider the economic fluctuation, and after the Olympic Games, for example, it could go down. So when the inbound influx comes down, maybe we have too many business hotels, and what would happen to the landscape of Tokyo? So I get that concern from time to time. So you mentioned that it's easier to build hotels in Japan. Is there any concern about the oversupply? Is that something that you are aware of in the industry?
It's a legitimate concern, but I think you have to really understand where Japan is in its development of tourism. You know, having an Olympics isn't a peak. In the last 20 years, every Olympics Games that has been held in every city, tourism has grown since that year. So Olympic Games are not a peak of tourism. It's really just a way of marketing the country, and it should never be interpreted as a one-off event. It should never be treated like it. So in terms of the amount of supply coming into the market, if you look at the growth of the demand that's come through, it's staggering. And 4 years ago, you had this huge influx of visitors. Millions and millions every year were coming in, but you didn't have any new hotels opening up. So where did they stay? They stayed in Airbnb. And the hotels opening up now, which is really as a result of what happened 3 or 4 years ago, because it takes time to build hotels. What's happening now is people are and particularly with the new Airbnb legislation, people are leaving Airbnb and going into the hotels as soon as they open. So what we find is when a hotel opens, it fills immediately. And if you look at the supply and demand statistics for Tokyo, for Osaka, every time there's a big influx of supply, the demand basically matches that, the growth in the demand matches that, which shows that we have what we call as frustrated demand for hotel accommodation. And that's because of the additional numbers coming in, and it's because people are using Airbnb and moving from Airbnb into hotels. From our perspective, the average length of stay in one of our hotels is 1.5 nights to 2 nights maximum. That's not really an Airbnb market, so it's not a threat to us per se, but it actually allows the country to grow its tourism in a very rapid way. But you need to be careful because sometimes you can overload infrastructure, and that has been the case in certain areas.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask Mr. Karaike. You are the top management. At the same time, you're a business producer. You produced 7 stars and new businesses. You are a business producer, and you are very capable in doing it, and you are very famous for that. So I'd like to ask your opinion on these inbound customers. This is really growing, as was in the graph. And when did you notice this explosion? And what was your approach and what was your idea? Could you please look back about what you're doing? Yes. Well, when we say inbound visitors, well, I started this international exchange business that was 30 years ago. We started exchange with international guests, and we had a port in Hakata and Busan port were connected with the ship called Beetle, and that was 30 years ago. And since then, I am involved in this business, international exchange. That was my initiation. And now, well, we see so many, exponential growth of inbound visitors here in Japan in terms of statistics. Since Abe administration was inaugurated, that was December 2012. And next year, 2013, was the actual initial year of our administration. So 2013, the inbound visitors were 10.3 million, and 2018, 31.2 million. So 5 times as much since then. And since 5 years ago, I could predict this situation because Asian countries are growing economically, and because of this impetus, we started to have a lot of international visitors from Japan, outbound visitors. So, well, I shouldn't say this, but if we don't do anything, the inbound customers who are supposed to increase. We had this foundation already, and we were benefited from such a situation. As I mentioned before, other than the railway business, we have hotel and real estate business and drugstore business and commercial facilities, real estate business. And we really are benefited from inbound visitors because their wallets will bring us a lot of money because of their consumption, and the money comes into our company. That's a contribution from them. And when we look at department store sales last year, when we look at the nationwide department store sales, 7 to 8% of the revenue of those department stores came from consumption of those inbound customers, so 7 to 8%. And we do have hotel business nationwide. In terms of this hotel business of ours, on the average, 20% is the inbound customers. In Tokyo, 60% and over are inbound customers, and 30% and over is from inbound customers in Okinawa as well. So we do have sustainable business because of the inbound customers. So when we look at these recent years, when we look at the inbound visitors, well, quantitatively, we were expanding the business, but qualitatively, we see such a transformation. There are 2 big pieces of transformation. One is how they travel. Conventionally, those people who come from Asian countries, 5, 6 years ago, they were group tourists. But recently, in these few years, drastically, individual visitors come, especially from China, Chinese visitors. Well, that's the biggest population of inbound customers from China. And about 3 years ago, they started to shift from group tourism to individual tourism. We have more individual tourists now compared to those years. And in Shanghai, we have the consulate to issue visas, and they say about 20% is group and about 80% individual tourists. So very high speed of individual tourism in China, and the objectives, purposes of the tourists are different right now. The best 5 purposes conventionally was number 1, food. Number 1, to enjoy food. Number 2, shopping. Number 3, nature and sightseeing. Number 4, history and culture. Number 5 is onsen, hot spring. And those are the top 5. And in these recent years, they are not really different, but the order has been changing little by little. For example, Asian tourists enjoy shopping and onsen. They are very popular for Asian tourists. But for those from Western countries, they enjoy Japanese culture, history, and Japanese lifestyle. They are interested in those. So the purposes are different. And Asian tourists as well, they are getting more and more westernized in that sense. It's not only onsen, it's not only shopping. They are more interested in Japanese culture, history, and they want to look into Japanese lifestyle. The objectives are different from Asian type to Western type. And when we look at famous tourist destinations, according to TripAdvisor, Kyoto Fushimi Inari Shrine is number 1 6 consecutive years. And Miyajima, Hiroshima Prefecture, and Todaiji Temple of Nara Prefecture, and Sanju Sangendo, that's Kyoto. Those are in best 10. And around Tokyo, in best 20, we always see Narita Sanshinshoji Temple and Nikko Toshogu Shrine, Asakusa Sensoji Temple, and Meiji Shrine. So very historical and cultural places are very popular among those visitors. And Kobe, maybe fewer. Well, Kobe people don't like it. Kobe doesn't attract inbound tourists. And near Tokyo, Yokohama, we have less inbound customers. Well, when we had rugby games, Yokohama was a place for games, but people stay in Tokyo. They don't stay in Yokohama. So Yokohama people were really Yokohama people didn't really like it. Why not Yokohama? Yokohama is very popular for Japanese people, very famous destination. But for visitors from other countries, the sceneries are not really different from their own countries. So for them, well, Yokohama doesn't really show something different from their own countries, and Kobe as well, so they are not really popular. Asakusa is very popular. So we have very Japanese culture and history, and they are very popular for inbound customers. And because of such qualitative changes, we have some challenges for the inbound tourism. Quantitatively, for a long run, we are going to expand the business. When we look at China, they have 1.3, 1.4 billion people in China. And those who come to Japan, last year, 7 million people, so 0.0 some percent of people come to Japan. So it could go to 2%, 3% without doing anything. So they come to Japan. When we think about this, well, absolute number of people who come to Japan in the long run is going to increase more and more. So the government target 2022, 40 million visitors. That's their target. And depending on the international situation, there might be some fluctuations. But timing-wise, it might be different. But in the long run, we can for sure achieve 40 million, and that's not the end. And what we have to focus on right now is, without doing anything, we are going to see more people coming to Japan. That's true. But how we can increase repeat visitors is important. That's something we should focus on. And I have one acquaintance who went to Turkey, and after that, he went to Dubai. He came back and he said, Turkey is a country that I repeatedly go to, but not Dubai. I really wanted to go to Dubai, but one time was enough. Why is that? Because when you look at the regions and the countries, it really depends on what kind of stories, narratives they have, culture and tradition. And in Turkey, they have such abundance of history, stories to tell. So you want to go back to Turkey. And Japan, is Japan a country that you want to come back? That's my concern. The government has initiatives and private companies have initiatives to increase repeat visitors. And if we continue this effort, I'm sure that we can attract more inbound customers. That's one.
お役所にちょっとこう
The second thing is probably going against the government, if I may say. The cruises is drawing a lot of attention. Cruise ships last year, the visitors, 2.4 million people came via the cruise ships, and 60% come to Kyushu. So 2.44 million people. How is it changing? The year before, actually, there is a decline year on year because of the port capacity, and the cruise business probably is struggling. So last year it has declined. And I have been saying that we should not have too high expectation from the cruise demand or cruise business, because we are a railway company, and the cruise ships, they have those people who come on the cruise, they don't take railways. Trains. So they come in the morning by ship, and they go back to the ship in the evening. So they take buses, and they go to the duty-free shops, and they have lunch at the restaurant. And then in the evening, they go back to their ships. So they do not experience the onsen, hot springs in Kyushu, which is very famous. And also they do not stay in the hotels. So the attractiveness of Kyushu is hot springs and the volcano, the landscape, and also the omotenashi or hospitality of the Japanese inns, and also one of the attractiveness of Japanese culture. So they don't experience any of them, and they just go back on the cruise ships. So what happens is that we do the survey whether they want to take another cruise ships. Of course, there are some people who would like to do that again, because they like the cruise vessels. It's a very luxurious experience. So the destination is not so important. So that when they come to Kyushu, they do the tourism in Kyushu, but they are not experiencing the attractiveness of Kyushu, and they go back. So they're not going to be the repeat visitor of Kyushu or Japan. So the government or administration, they are trying to attract more cruise ships, and they are trying to develop ports. I do not think that's a good idea, because the important thing is how to increase the repeat visitors, because absolute number will naturally grow. So we have to increase the repeat visitors who are interested in the history and culture. So again, we should not have too high expectation from the cruise vessel. That's the second point. And the third point is that the Japanese culture and history is drawing a lot of attention, and the purpose of their travels is more on experiencing the history and the culture of Japan. We are seeing the increased interest. And because of that, what we should do is that we should really polish up our culture, Japanese culture. So not to expand the port facilities for the cruise ships. I think we should spend more for culture and tradition of Japan, so that we can protect, maintain, and develop those cultures and traditions. So that's what we should do. So from those perspectives, I have been saying that with the Mitsui Fudosan, there's a real estate company, I'm always impressed with them. In charge of the development of Nihonbashi area of Tokyo. Of course, they have the modern facilities, commercial facilities, but what impresses me is that in Nihonbashi there is a Fukutoku no Mori, which is a forest. It's a full of greenery, it's a space. And they created that space, and there is a shrine, Fukutoku Shrine, which continues from Tokugawa Ieyasu era. So they rebuilt this historic shrine. And the culture and tradition of Japan is now reborn in Nihonbashi area. So this is a very grand project, and I have been very impressed with them. So something like that. Japanese culture and history. From the development perspective, we should really leverage and strengthen and enhance that. I think that's very important. The fourth point, this is more of the operational thing. Last year there has been the earthquake in Hokkaido, and the past several years we have had a major typhoon or torrential rain. And the biggest problem is the inbound tourists, the foreigners, how to guide them. Usually, if it was a group tourism, even if there is a disaster or if there is an abnormality, there's a person in charge of the group tour. So we just communicate with that. But there are individuals now. So individual tourists, we have to communicate to them where the disaster had afflicted and what needs to be done. So we have to communicate that to them. So from our perspective, the railway company, the biggest problem is that So this time with the typhoon and the heavy rain, many non-Japanese tourists didn't know what to do. So we have to provide the multilingual services, and we have to give appropriate guidance for them. So I think we really have to improve that. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. It was very precise and also critical. Maybe something that we have to tell the government. So Mr. Ho and Mr. Hansing, I think that rather than developing the port, we should really develop and work on the culture and history. I think they were nodding their heads off. And Turkey and Dubai, I agree completely. You talked about Yokohama, so I'd like to ask Mr. Ho.
横浜
So, Mr. Ho, Yokohama is one of your candidates for your IR business. I understand. So, as Mr. Karaike said right now, well, Yokohama is not really attractive to inbound customers. And when you build up an IR business, do you think it's going to be a big trigger to invite inbound customers? And do you think they are going to repeatedly come to your facility?
I would, I think for Yokohama, Yokohama is our priority. So Melco, we made our statement clear about a month ago that we are focusing our priority on and prioritizing Yokohama. And I totally agree. Right? I think right now, Yokohama is very much of a day trip market. So most people stay in, and I think the benefit of Yokohama is its proximity to Tokyo, but at the same time, that is also causing a lot of people to go into Yokohama for the day and then leave. And so what we're trying to do by building the world's greatest and biggest IR, and we're talking about at least $10 billion investment, is to make Yokohama is the second largest city in Japan, a primary city for people to go to, and for people to stay more than 2 or 3 days. And so as part of the IR facility, I think also in Japan, a lot of people think, oh, IR, integrated resort, that means casino, but that's furthest from the truth, because the casino portion of the IR is only 3%. So there's 97% that is on non-gaming, on hotels, on MICE facilities, on entertainment, on attractions, on art. And that 97% is what Melco does very well on. And I think we're known probably as much as an entertainment company as we are a gaming company. And so in Macau, we have the award-winning show, award-winning architecture, and that's why we always want to work with creative minds who have a genuine passion for the places that we go to. And in this case, Japan, people who can, again, promote the culture, the history of Japan, but at the same time, similar to when I first came to Japan 37 years ago, it was like walking into the future, because there were aspects of coming to Tokyo, like going to the Blade Runner movie, because it was so futuristic with the lights and everything. And so how can we design a integrated resort in Yokohama that blends, again, both the history and culture, but also take back to the 80s when Japan was a rival to the US as one of the world power in terms of that. And so I think it's, given the infrastructure and the accessibility of Yokohama, I think has a great potential and a great future. And so I think the key for us really is to engage with more of the local associations and the local communities, because of course the opinion, we need to address the concern on top of promoting the fact that there are enormous economic benefits to having a $10 billion IR that employs 20,000 people when it's open and 20,000 people to build it. There's also the issue that we need to address together with the local community, that whether it's gaming addiction, problem gaming, what can we do on that? And I think our strategy at Melco is we've developed a facial recognition biometric system that tracks the visitors going there. So really making use of technology to combat that. But I think the most important thing for us right now is really work with more of the local associations. And we're very proud, in addition to announcing the Melco Creative Partnership, earlier this year we announced we became a community partner to the Yokohama F. Marinos Soccer Club. So they will go into the community and teach children and kids how to play soccer. And I think that this is part of the Melco way of giving back to the communities that we want to be a part of. So I think Yokohama and the integrated resort opportunity there is just phenomenal. And I think it deserves really the best integrated resort ever built in the world.
ありがとうございます。100億
Thank you very much. $10 billion. Investment is huge. Well, today you didn't have a video, so I'm very sorry. But last year, Melco Resort created a City of Dreams, a huge IR facility in Macau. And maybe you have seen it on the TV program. And the building is very artistic. That's a beautiful facility. How much investment did you make?
Dreams, we actually opened City of Dreams 10 years ago in Macau. But I think similar to the Melco philosophy is we continue to give back to the community. So we have reinvested significantly in the property. And so I think what you're referring to is the Morpheus Hotel Tower, which is part of the City of Dreams. It was one of the last buildings ever designed by the late Dame Zaha Hadid. And this is a great example of us wanting to give back to the communities because we spoke to the Macau government, and Macau government really wanted a architectural art piece, an icon for the city. And I think that's why we're very lucky to work with Zaha to design that building. But City of Dreams is a $5 billion development. But again, it wasn't $5 billion on day one. It was, I think the original budget was about $3 billion. But then in the 10 years since, we have continued to reinvest in it. And Morpheus was about $1.2 billion in terms of investment. But again, that's what we say as well. In Japan, is the initial investment is at least 10 billion. But depending on the company that the government chooses, but if the government chooses Melco, we would continue to develop more and more things. And at our other integrated resort in Macau, another $3 billion resort called Studio City, we have new attractions almost every 6 months. So we're opening one of the largest water parks there, a VR center. So again, it's always a continuous. We want to make sure that it's always there's something fresh, and then so that we can have the repeat visitors and the high quality repeat visitor.
その IR
I see. So IR business, 60 million inbounds coming to Japan. In that era, I think that we need more capacity. But casino, there are a lot of casinos in Asia, and IR is in Singapore, Macau, and Manila. And Japanese government by 2024, they're saying that at least 3 IRs will be built. So there could be a very severe competition among the IR providers. What are your views on that?
I don't think so, because again, Japan, for the whole country, it's only talking about 3 IRs. And they are, of course, the national government still needs to pick exactly which prefecture and which city wins. But assuming is one prefecture, it's one IR in the Kansai region, one in the Kanto region, and then one in a regional region, whether it's Kyushu or Hokkaido. I think there's significant room for the IRs to strive, because as Tim mentioned as well, shortage of hotel rooms. You know, in Olympic, it's just the Olympics, the Osaka World Expo, the rugby that's happening right now. Those are just great examples to draw people into Japan for the first time. I think the key is to bring in the right mix of visitors so that they will keep coming back again and again and again. And I think with 3 IR licenses and the size of Japan and how unique the country is, I actually think there wouldn't be a lot of competition. If anything, I think there's room for more growth going forward.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you. So we are talking about a bit of the risks. So I'd like to ask that question to Mr. Karaike. Of course, there are always economic fluctuations which would impact your businesses, and the diplomatic relationship having a major impact. That happened in the summer this year. We are, I think, suffering. The Korean tourists have drastically been reduced, especially the touristic places and the international inns and the restaurants in Kyushu were affected by the decrease of the Korean tourists. So this is not the economy. It's the very drastic impact from the diplomatic relationship. So how in your industry should take that? And do you think that this is an unavoidable risk? I would like to hear your thoughts on that, Mr. Karaike. 30 years ago, Korea and between Busan and Hakata, we created the boat service. And during the 30 years, I think that we saw the very active exchange between the two countries, and now it has cooled down, and we repeated that cycle. So in the good times, it's a pleasure. But when it cools down, how do you overcome that? What is happening right now, we have to really accept it. The international relationship will impact us, and that is one of the attractiveness of our business. And there are always fluctuations, ups and downs. After 9/11 terrorism attack, the tourism cooled down, and the global flow has cooled down after that. And after that, in Middle East, when something happens, then that would impact the international exchange. So international situation and the international businesses are very closely related, so we cannot disregard that. But since we are doing business, for 1 year, 2 years, sometimes we have to persevere. But we have to be strong enough. And when the time is good, we have to accumulate our strength. And things change. We have to prepare ourselves so that we will do better when the good times comes next. I think that's important. We need a basic strength. So sometimes something are not just uncontrollable from our perspective. So we have to prepare ourselves for the next boom or next good times. That's the only thing we can do. Of course, there will be the good times in the future. There is no question about that. Thank you. I hope that the people in Kyushu will overcome the current difficulties. We are running out of time. We talked about also the getting along with the foreign travelers, tourists. Aside from the tourists, in the coming years, there will be foreigners living in Japan for good. So that would be another aspect. I'd like to ask Mr. Hansing. This April, there was a change of the Immigration Act, and now the door is more open to the foreign workers. So this includes the tourism. So these kind of changes, what kind of impact have you seen? Is there any impact on your business?
The impact really for us, other than obviously needing a vibrant and strong tourism economy, the impact is from the other side. We've got to staff the hotels, and Japan is, as we know, in virtually full employment. So finding staff and the appropriate staff is always a challenge. Slightly less for us because we have on average 12 full-time staff per hotel, which is probably a little bit different to Lawrence's hotels. So it's probably more of a question for Lawrence because he's going to have to employ hundreds of thousands of people. But what it does is it allows us to bring in additional staff because we need to. We have in Red Planet Japan 11 nationalities employed, 11 different nationalities employed already. And that's from within our countries, from within our group and outside of that group as well. So it's a piece of legislation that I think is very much needed if you want to continue to grow your economy and grow the tourism sector. You absolutely must have that.
11カ国の従業員
So 11 countries. So Red Planet, that kind of country should come into Japan more so that we can transform ourselves in terms of staff. Well, you are talking about Lawrence business, and in IR business, you need a lot of staff members, and especially you might need for nationals. That should be a big portion of your staff.
It's important to really focus on local first. And ultimately, Japan as a country, I think almost 1/3 of the population is in the greater Tokyo area. And so I think the goal for the integrated resorts as well is to bring people back, because we are in a fun, entertaining, exciting industry. And so the goal is really to attract more young people to go back and work in this industry. So our experience in, whether it's in Macau or in the Philippines, yes, in the beginning, because it's a new industry, we do need some expats to come and teach, really train the trainers. But then over the longer haul, we've really focused on locals being in managerial positions. So I think for our business in Macau and in the Philippines is over 80% of our managerial positions are really locals because they've worked up and learned it. So I think the key is, of course, having a more flexible immigration policy is good, but at the same time, I think we'd be very focused on how do we really train up the community and try to get more people to move back to Yokohama and also work and live in Yokohama. So I think that would be the key for us.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you very much. Well, in terms of living together, other than people who live in Japan, over tourism is beginning to be an issue in G20. The sightseeing ministers a meeting, there was a conclusion. So Mr. Hansing is really promoting the tourist industry globally, and from your point of view, over tourism is going to be a problem as the sightseeing tourism industry is going to grow. Do you think we can solve this over tourism issue?
There's a problem in certain areas of the world. If you want to see some examples of it, you don't have to go too far. There's certain areas in Thailand where they've had to take some drastic action and close down islands and close down beaches because there's been too much damage to the natural environment. So there's kind of this cycle of things that get shut to allow it to regenerate, and that's one way of dealing with it. The issue is all about the type of tourists, as we said, and managing the tourist flow, not just having it all go to Kyoto, for example. Yes, Kyoto is very popular, but it's also getting the tourists out, as Lawrence was saying, into the countryside and into the other areas and the other regions that aren't so famous, and making sure that your infrastructure is there and making and encouraging group tours to go out and explore those areas as well. So it's really spreading the tourism rather than having it focused into one particular piece, I think, is really the answer. And globally, more and more people are traveling. The world is getting bigger. China, we haven't seen anything yet from China. I mean, there's so many people that will ultimately travel around the world. So I think it's something that needs to be examined very carefully, but I think the question really is getting the tourists out into the regions and then spreading it round. And then everybody gets a fair share of the economic benefit, and it does less damage to any particular one place.
ハンシングさんから大変
So Mr. Hansing had a very, very important proposal. Mr. Karaike, I'd like to ask you, so we have to make the tourism spread into the regional areas, and also for those foreign nationals who live in Japan, especially in the end of June this year, for those residents of Japan, 2.8 million, we have more than 1 million coming more recently. And revitalization of the regional area is a very important thing for Japanese government. So they are opening the door to those people, but they come to Tokyo, Osaka, big areas because they have more jobs there. But there are so many good things about Kyushu. So you just invite those people to Kyushu for those people who want to live in Japan to come to Kyushu, to invite those people. What should you do? Yes. In our company, there are so many foreign nationals who are working. For example, 7 stars. For example, crew and also ground staff members. We have 2 people from New Zealand. And they are doing international sales and also domestic sales as well. So they are really helping our company. As in this example, because they are foreign nationals, we give only jobs that are applicable to those people. It's not like that. Our attitude should be different. We just look at their aptitude so that we can commission any job to those people. Well, for those people from New Zealand, for example, well, some of them were closely contacted by a TV program that's very famous for talking to foreign visitors. And he said on the TV program that he wanted to serve the 7 stars. And he was in the TV program. And after 3 years, he just quit the company. So I thought he just wanted to be on the TV program. So some successful cases. We do have very successful cases. There was the Japanese team of rugby team that consists of people from many different countries, but their purpose is one. Sometimes they compete with each other, I believe, between players. But once they start to fight against the rivals, they just support each other. They respect each other to create one team, one goal. Michael Leach is the captain. He is one of the foreign national, and he is teaching Japanese anthem, national anthem, to the other players. And Victory Road is really consolidating their spirits. They respect their own strength and also respect each other's strength, and they target one goal. And that's the best model example of living together with different nationals. And likewise, not only foreign nationals, but there are some jobs that foreign nationals can only do.
これから一緒に住ん
But since we are going to live together, we have to keep that in our mind. And together with those foreigners, the culture of Japan and the customs and the rules, we want to inherit them so that the next generation or so that we can promote our region. So we are in this together, so we have to accept them as one of our team members. Well, thank you very much. Sorry that our time is running out. We have 3 energetic speakers. I'm sure you wanted to listen more, but our time is over. Now, government is targeting 40 million, 60 million, and we're skeptical after the Olympic Games. But today, from the 3 panelists, they said that the 60 million is achievable. So if that is the case, also we would see the increase of the foreign workers. We have to consider the business opportunities. and we have to make sure that we live with them, coexist with them, not segregated. So as the person, individual, and as an employee of the company, I fully recognize that. So those three gentlemen, you felt the philosophy. So please experience the City of Dreams or Red Planet Hotels, and 7-star. Of course, I want to ride it, but you have to go through the lottery, right? Even the king can have to go through the fair lottery, right? There is no connection, which would work. Sadaharu Oh, I had to say no to him, a very well-known baseball player. Mr. Ho, have you written 7-Star Railway of Kyushu JR? It's a cruise railway. Have you taken that?
Pleasure, but now that I hear about it, I'm definitely gonna sign up for the lottery. And
ぜひミスター
Yes, please, Mr. Ho. You are lucky guy, so you might win. Is that right, Mr. Karaike? Yes, I'm looking forward to it. And Mr. Hansing, Kyushu cities and the rural areas, it's a wonderful place. So please visit and try to ride a 7-star train. So thank you very much indeed, gentlemen. Please give a big round of applause to three gentlemen. Mr. Ho, Mr. Hansing, and Mr. Karaike, thank you very much. With that, we have come to the end of the whole program of 21st Nikkei Forum. Please make sure to leave the receivers that you used on the desk. Please make sure to take all of your belongings. If you leave anything on the desk, we would dispose them. So please make sure